If you always wanted to try out watercolor painting, today might just be the right kind of day to start. If that's what you are looking for, do not miss out on my watercolor mini series, because in these 5 episodes I used my best experience as a watercolor painter and put together a guide to show you basic and advanced watercolor techniques, but also less conventional watercolor approaches and effects. Today's episode is the last of this series and will give you more useful tips and tricks on how to deal with watercolor and help you towards results that motivate rather than frustrate. And also, I'm Jane, I love watercolor painting and have been using it for 10 years. And if you enjoy my videos, consider subscribing to my channel for regular painting videos and tutorials. Tip number 1: avoid paper warping. To achieve having a flat painting and also nice and clean white edges, never underestimate the very first step of the painting process, which is using masking tape properly. After placing the masking tape around your paper, use your fingers and press down carefully every single edge. You need to make sure that masking tape adheres to the paper as well as the board or whatever you are fixing your paper against. Try to also use a strong masking tape that can actually hold your painting until the painting process is complete. Never should there remain any free space between the paper and the masking tape, because this will allow the water to flow under it and cause paper warping and messy edges. You should be even more careful and press even harder when working with textured papers and rough papers. Tip number 2: avoid ripping your painting. Removing masking tape can be tricky, and I myself have ripped a few nice paintings before learning how to care enough for how I remove the tape. Strong tapes keep the painting decently flat, but they also pose larger risk of ripping the paper. So the proper way to reduce this risk is to remove the tape slowly and in a direction away from the painting. This way, even if you rip the paper, only the white edge gets damaged. And by the way, student grade papers are much more fragile and prone to getting ripped by the tape than cotton papers. Tip number 3: wake your palette before painting. When using watercolor pens or dried tube paint, reactivate your paints before working with them for best results. Using a spray bottle is the fastest approach, and after spraying your palette with clean water, leave them be for about 2 to 3 minutes. After this time, your paints will be softer and easier to use. Tip number 4: always use testing paper. Since watercolor is somewhat hard to correct, it is the best policy to measure twice and cut once. You can never be sure what color and how strong is on your brush unless you make a brush stroke, so don't let your painting be the testing ground. Better than that, use spare watercolor paper cut in smaller pieces to test your colors beforehand. I always reuse unsuccessful watercolor studies or old paintings as testing papers, and I always keep them close when painting. Tip number 5 is to be gentle to your watercolor paper. Watercolor papers are delicate, and the more you touch it or manipulate it before painting, the more surprises await you once you place wet paint on it. Even sketching directly on your watercolor paper can cost it a lot of resilience, and that often affects how many washes can the paper handle. To be precise, actual sketching itself doesn't cause harm, but the erasing does. It is up to you whether you choose to do your sketches directly to your watercolor paper, and for me personally, studies and loose simple artworks are never the reason to carefully prepare separate sketch, so go ahead. But if your goal is to paint a clean watercolor painting of a rather complicated subject, you should consider using a separate sheet of lighter paper and do the drawing there. Transferring the sketch to your watercolor paper can be done using either a light table or transfer paper, but the results spare your paper a lot of unnecessary harm. I always try to trace my drawings from left to right to avoid smudging the graphite, because I am right-handed. It is also a good idea to use bits of masking tape to fix the paper and the sketch against the lighting table so that it doesn't move while tracing. The traced drawing might also feel a bit more stiff and less organic than the first drawing, so use only light pressure when tracing and correct the trace afterwards if needed. To lighten the trace or a drawing, use a kneaded eraser, but if you really need to erase on a watercolor paper, after all, make sure that you use a soft, dust-free eraser that only lifts the graphite and doesn't damage the fibers. My go-to is this one by Faber-Castell, and I swear by it. Tip number 6, be mindful of the excess water. When creating a new artwork, you might already know if you want to achieve smooth finish or more expressive and bloomy watercolor look. If your goal is to paint an even wash without blooms, I recommend you to create a tilt. It doesn't have to be too steep, a thicker masking tape will often help when placed under the board to make about 30-degree angle. This can allow the excess water on your painting to flow towards the bottom and will not be able to cause blooms randomly. Use your brush to remove the excess water from the bottom of your wash and let it dry in this position. If, on the other hand, your goal is to create blooms and expressions, you will achieve that by painting on a flat surface and leave the excess water on your paper intentionally while drying. I painted the left part of this portrait without the tilt, and you can see that the standing excess water caused bloomy effects in random and unwanted places. On the other hand, painting in a tilted setup often helps me to achieve much smoother washes. And my last watercolor tip is to use proper brush size. However weird that sounds, but when learning to paint with watercolor, it is quite normal to feel like you don't have enough control over your brush, and because of this you might be tempted to paint with smaller brushes that are intended for painting details and in a way can even remind you of a drawing tool that you have more control over. Small brushes, such as this one, definitely have their place in your watercolor toolbox, but trying to cover large areas with them leads often to very patchy results and even can damage paper fibers. This type of brush can't hold water well, and so it needs to be loaded with paint much more frequently. Painting takes a lot more time and the applied paint dries very fast. Instead, reach for a proper sized watercolor brush with either natural or soft synthetic bristles that holds a lot of water, allowing you to cover an area very fast and efficiently. This type of brush also doesn't damage the paper fibers, so the painting will have much more consistent and clean look. Do not worry, the brush control is something that you can develop quite fast. A couple of paintings might even be enough to conquer the uncomfortable feeling that comes with learning to use new tools. So these are my watercolor tips, and I hope that some of them can help you deal with first watercolor problems and create sort of an understanding of how much these approaches can actually affect your watercolor efforts. In time, you will develop painting habits and won't even have to consciously think about them, and the time spent on each painting will also decrease. And since I teach live workshops to beginners for more than a couple of years, I noticed that the most scary first phase of learning new technique often passes quickly after a person completes about 10 paintings on average, and from that point on they have much more confidence and have more fun when painting and already know what to expect from the medium most of the time. So I hope that's encouraging enough, and I wish you all the best. Have a good day, and I see you in my next video very soon. Bye bye.